are calm, empty, beautiful places. But science fiction is a kind of medium designed to kind of exaggerate our own fears of the existing city as a kind of catharsis, nearly like, let's imagine that it's even worse. And these science fiction cities, they always hinge on, there's always two main scenarios. The first scenario is the city extremely dense. There's always this fear of a demographic explosion. So like there are 400 billion people living on the earth. They're all packed together in machine-like cities with fascist or Stalinist dictators, Big Brother, or even robots who govern us. And for example, this film, Soylent Green, everybody gets to eat Soylent Green, which is this kind of horrible green stuff, and it comes out of machines, and that's all that the citizens get to eat. And then Charlton Heston discovers that Soylent Green is actually recycled human beings. So here you see the riots happening in the city when he discovers that, and he says we have to escape from this machine that we are living in. So here you see one of the big mythologies of riots and the city and the organization and the alienation and the modernism. This is the modernism of the city as a big designed, perfectly ordered machine. So actually Soylent Green is a kind of critique of the welfare state. This is a similar book by Robert Silverberg, also treats always the same. The demographic growth has reached the point that the entire Earth is consisting of high rises of 100 meters high, a kind of a Winnie Maas wet dream. And also the recycling of human flesh is somehow Y Factory-ish, I think. We should talk, maybe we could do a collaboration with it. Well, anyway, Robert Silverberg, The World Inside, it's the same thing, and then there's always the one individual who discovers the secret, and then he wants to break out of this prison and go into nature, because there's still a little bit of nature on some planet somewhere over, and take his loved one, escape from the system, and then the system will never allow, of course, one person giving away the secret, because then the whole thing might explode. So that's always what these books are about, beginning with 1984. 1984 being written in the same year as the New Towns Act was signed in Great Britain, starting off an enormous wave of high-rise building. So there is a kind of relationship. Then there is the other, more French, you could say, even if this is a British author, but more post-60s, more post-68 perverse scenario, which is, and it's more empirical in a way. It's not so much science fiction that plays in the 24th century, but it's science fiction that happens in the here and now. This is a book by J.G. Ballard, who once used to be the most favorite author of all architects. He wrote the so-called disaster trilogy, one being about high-rises, the second one being about it was called Concrete Island, about being trapped in a highway intersection. And the third is about car crashes, called Crash. But High Rise is his most architectural one, because High Rise talks about a very modern, beautifully designed, perfectly facilitated, completely automated high-rise tower at the edge of London, where rich people go to live in a kind of exodus, of rich people, and intellectuals go and live in this tower. And once they live in this tower on top of each other in this beautifully shining, gleaming tower where everything works perfectly, they gradually start degenerating. First they have sex with a neighbor's wife. Then they have sex with the neighbor's wife while they have tied down the neighbor on the chair, forcing him to look at that. Then they catch the dog of the neighbors and eat him alive, barbecue him alive. Then they start a war, trying to with axes and fire. They try to conquer the upper stories. Then they, etc. So these people gradually revert to a kind of completely degenerated, perverted animal state. Because, and it is never really explained because, but somehow this is caused by living on top of each other in this high-rise flat where everything is taken care of and they never have to worry about anything. So if they don't have to worry about anything and everything is taken care of, you know what happens. Another one, which is a beautiful film, I'm sure some of you know it, Them Rock. It's a film from the early 70s. Which more or less, I don't have to say anything about it, describes exactly what happens in the film, in the book by J.G. Ballard. So also here it is the modern, clean, automated, everything taken care of idea that somehow causes people to revert back to an animal state. Okay. Now, this is just all British and French intellectuals sitting in their suburban or central inner city studies and thinking up these kind of perverse scenarios. At the same time, in reality, in the real inner cities of the real American inner cities, or the real French or British or inner cities where there is an often very low educated, consisting of ethnic minorities, youth culture, sitting there in these areas that are crumbling and falling apart around them, you can also see that these areas have created a kind of popular culture, a kind of imagery, a kind of language, a kind of universe nearly, a kind of cosmos of how could you say this? A kind of a kind of scary city backdrop to extremely authentic, extremely localized urban pop culture. This, for example, it's an LP cover from 1972, I think, by the Tower of Power. Now, the Tower of Power was the best funk band of the late 60s, early 70s. They became, especially their horn section, after a couple of years, these guys became millionaires because they were hired by everyone from Phil Collins to David Bowie, etc. Everybody hired their horn section. But they started out as a group of a soul band from, I think they were from Detroit also. And this is their album called Urban Renewal. Urban Renewal is, so as you can already see, Urban Renewal, which was the big project of the especially Democrat governors and presidents in the United States from Johnson and Kennedy onward, to modernize the cities and to give everyone equal share and to make the cities beautiful and healthy and equal, etc. This is how they understood it. The other word for urban renewal in these circles was urban renewal, nigger removal. That's how they called it. And they saw, so this album, which was filled with really fantastic, a very energetic, very vibrant music, it was also an incredible critique, or not a critique, it was just a kind of show of disgust or of anger at what they saw going around them. Now another one is for the British band, interesting in the late 70s. When you had the late 70s, early 80s, there was this very interesting confluence of the reggae culture, of the immigrants from Jamaica and also from Africa, and the punk movement, this anarchistic, left-wing, nihilistic punk movement coming together around with one theme that they shared, the riots. There were the late 70s in the British cities, Brixton, or in London, Handsworth, in Birmingham, riots. And this is the album of Steel Pulse, and Steel Pulse was an album, a reggae band consisting of Jamaican immigrants, and they made this, and here they are very clear on what it is. It's a revolution, the Handsworth Revolution. And what you can see also here is this kind of allegory. You see the council estates of Handsworth kind of falling apart after the riot, burnt out Volkswagens on the street, and the whole thing being grown over, not with British nature, but with Jamaican nature. So it's kind of the Western European city is being destroyed, breaks down to the ground, and then black culture takes over. You all know the album of Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet. This is where it begins. Linton Kwesi Johnson, his first album, a reggae poet from Jamaica. His first album, one of his most famous songs is called The Great Insurrection, which is exactly about these riots. So you can see that youth culture, pop culture, reggae culture, punk culture, soul culture, funk culture, not only uses the aesthetics and the background and the architecture of policing, of violence, of urban decay, of fear. It uses, that's what its background, its scene, but it also has an idea about it. It says what it is, it gives words to it, it says it's an insurrection, and it also somehow prophesizes about it. This is a little bit, here we have some Dutch, some Dutch versions too. So this is hip-hop culture, of course. Hip-hop culture has this strange combination of, and you see also in many of these hip-hop album covers, you can see either, you always see these three things. You see backdrops of urban decay, you see signs of policing, violence, etc., and you see incredible, aggressive signs of personal wealth, otherwise named bling. Here we have a French rapper in the French banlieue, and what is interesting about, what we find interesting about this connection between pop culture on the one hand and urban decay, and then specifically the question, is there a relationship between high-rise council estate planning, new town planning, modernist public housing design, and violence? These two questions are interesting, and I'll try to explain why, because I also don't know completely myself. I mean, you have to understand that for me and for us, for Samir and Tim and Claudia and Marta and me, this lecture series is also, you know, we're still learning about it, you know. It's a kind of experiment that we're taking out on you. But there's this one really interesting phenomenon, and it is that if you look at how pop culture works since the 60s, 70s, you can see that on the one hand, it is incredibly localized. I mean, you can point back, it's like with HIV/AIDS, there's always patient number 0. You can point back hip-hop to nearly one street corner somewhere in Brooklyn, somewhere in the late 70s. And then from there it spread out like the famous French riots, like wildfire over the world. And you can also see, so it has become completely globalized and completely localized at the same time. Because what happens is, hip-hop then came up and became completely global. And then you have this ridiculous idea of French boys who came straight from Africa to French, not through America or anything,